Hello, everyone, and welcome to Sociastrology. Today, I wanted to look at the full moon eclipse in Pisces that we will be experiencing on September 17th and 18th through the houses based on our rising signs so that we can get a sense of what part of our lives are going to be transforming the most, where we are going to be experiencing sudden strange events that are somewhat fated and are driving us in a new direction, and what kind of changes we can expect to see, not only around the time of this eclipse, around the 17th, 18th of September of this year, but also continuing through to February of 2027, when we will have our final eclipse along this axis of Pisces and Virgo. Now, if we want to look back in time a bit, at when the North Node and South Node were in Pisces and Virgo, which they are moving toward. They're not quite there yet, but this is why we have the eclipses starting here, is because it's starting to approach the cusp. But the last time that we had the nodal axis, which defines whether or not a full moon or a new moon will be an eclipse, because this is the part of, was in 2006 through 2007, June 2006 through December 2007 precisely is when we had those eclipses. And so if you were around then and things were happening for you, this would be a really wonderful time to look back to see some of the general themes that we'll be seeing arise for you in these coming years as well again. Now, the nodal axis here was opposite and therefore also created Pisces and Virgo eclipses in 2015 through 2017, and that is October 2015 through April of 2017. So that was when the North Node was in Virgo and the South Node was in the Pisces area. Now, this is kind of important. I would really more so look to this time frame and then just look at any similar occurrences that may have come up during this time. And I'll tell you why. Because the North Node is the leading edge. It's what the change, what the transformation is leading you toward. It's the purpose for the change in terms of where you're going in the future. The South Node, which is exactly opposite to this, which is at 7 degrees of Libra right now and moving back into Virgo, that represents change and transformation in terms of what are you moving away from? What are some things that you've outgrown? What are some of the areas of life where you might need to revise or reimagine or review in order to release some of the baggage that has come along with that? Now, you can do a bit of both of those things on both sides. That's totally fine. But it is something, it's a general nature to the North Node and the South Node, that the North Node is, and this may even be, especially in the Northern Hemisphere, this may be something that you want to consider, that the North and South Node may behave slightly differently based on the Northern versus Southern Hemisphere. And I don't think that there's been much research into this, but the North Node tends to be what's coming up and the South Node tends to be what is kind of being left behind there. Now, I want to take us through some general considerations before we take this through the houses so that we can get a little bit more of a fine-tuned consideration of what the eclipse is representing generally on a personal level before we take the house considerations into the big picture here. But before we get into it, if you are new here, please do consider subscribing. We do these long-term big transits like this. We look at them generally, and then we look at them through the houses to see how they are affecting you. We also look at political and mundane astrology as well as geopolitical astrology on this channel here. So if that's something that is of interest to you, then again, please do consider sticking around for future videos by subscribing. And if you don't mind helping me out with the algorithm by giving the video a thumbs up, I very much appreciate that. And without any further introduction, let us dive into the general considerations of these eclipses along the Pisces Virgo axis. So this axis does represent health. And speaking of, if my voice sounds a little bit weird or, off or annoying, I am still getting over being sick, and I will sadly have to probably continue to mention that. I'm not feeling bad really anymore. It's just my sinuses are constantly full, and so I'm talking a little bit differently. It's a little because I'm breathing differently. So I'm hoping that that's not too terribly annoying. But yeah, other than that, I'm generally feeling fine. My throat is good, but I'm just still talking a little bit weird. So that's what that is. I don't usually sound however I'm sounding right now. But yeah, so health, and along the lines of both mental health, spiritual health, and physical health generally come up along this axis of Virgo and Pisces here. So that may be something that we see come up as very significant within our lives. And not only health, but also places of health. So hospitals and things like this, clinics, institutions, and things like this may also come up in our lives during this period of time in a pretty significant or poignant way. Additionally, boundaries with these signs tend to come up. They tend to have rather soft boundaries. So working on boundaries is a way that this can present itself to us, where we need to strengthen those in order to, again, when it comes to like health, it's like strengthening the spiritual or psychological or emotional like immune system, where you have those blockages in place for the things that aren't healthy so that they can't really affect you, and that they, raise up those white blood cell reactions or those red flags or whatnot, to kind of keep at bay anything that you wouldn't necessarily want to allow into your life in that way. Additionally, caretaking and service. This is the service axis of Pisces and Virgo. So there may be things that come up where you need to do caretaking for someone. You need to be of service to someone or a group of people, or you are feeling drawn toward that, some sort of charity work or teaching, where you are sacrificing some level of yourself to take care of someone else. Now, this could be in a career. So it may not be a complete sacrifice, but it's still this kind of sacrificial type of career path of service to others. Now, you may also need to, at some point in this, be taken care of. And so that may also be something that you will need to become more comfortable with through this period of time. Additionally, intuition can come up with these signs along this axis, both spiritual and instinctual. So again, especially when it comes to boundaries or little things that capture your attention, can lead you along a path that you may not have otherwise considered that is of a great amount of significance to you. This could be spiritual or service-oriented in general, as well as ideological or political or cultural, along those lines of wanting for people to be cared for. And so you may be given kind of breadcrumbs, or you may just kind of feel things with regard to certain paths like that in your life, especially as we go through the houses along those lines as well. The intuition could be leading you pretty strongly, where it's not just ABC, it's all, perfectly laid out and understood. Even though Virgo is a very practical sign, they too are a very, very intuitive sign. And they may question their intuition a little bit more than Pisces, but it is there. And some of what we may be learning throughout this period of time, generally, collectively, on a personal level, is with the South Node going into Virgo, trying not to insist upon the deconstruction of intuitive feelings or spiritual hits or information that comes to us through ways that we can't necessarily quantify practically or scientifically, And again, that may also come through as those red flags, that internal immune system is also to an extent not just physical immune system, that's also internal, but that kind of spiritual or, psychological or emotional kind of immune system there is also driven pretty strongly by intuition. That's, one of the prime ways early on to recognize that something may be unhealthy along those lines. Again, we've kind of gone over this a little bit, but spirituality and practical plans. So grounding your dreams and your visions of your future with that North Node that is in Pisces and is looking forward in that way into reality, into the practical considerations that you do know from, living in this world. With that South Node moving into Virgo, it will be very important to bring those visions and that kind of spiritual guidance or drive that you're feeling in a specific direction to ground that into reality as we know how to do. Additionally, along this axis, we can see collecting and deconstructing. So by that, I mean, Pisces universalizes. It is ruled by Jupiter. It wants to take everything into consideration. It loves a grand narrative. It wants for everything to fit neatly into a broad perspective. And additionally, it would rather everything fit into that perspective than that it necessarily fit neatly. Now, Virgo definitely wants things to fit neatly, and it's more willing to leave certain things out of the consideration that are just going to create a mess of something. So it can break things down because it's ruled by Mercury, and Mercury is very deconstructive in a very productive and useful way, where it pulls apart anything that's not working to get at the heart of the problem and figure out what that is so that everything will fit neatly into place there. So there can be a bit of a push and pull between those urges. And one of the ways that we may actually see this come up in the coming years on a collective personal level is, in recent years, especially with the nodal axis recently being in Taurus, Scorpio, and then Aries, Libra, these are very us versus them, boundaries oriented signs. And they're ruled by planets that also tend to do that. They are both ruled by Venus and Mars. So there's one and then there's the other, And for instance, there's the two genders are considered to be associated with Venus and Mars, but they're also considered to be different and apart from each other and to have their own little teams, And what's bordering those signs is mutable signs, right? So we have the Venus axis here, and we have the Mars axis here, which isn't actually an axis. I'm using that term incorrectly, but Mars ruled signs are here, Venus ruled signs are here, and then on the sides of both of those are always going to be your Mercury Jupiter ruled signs. And when we get into Mercury Jupiter, there's a desire, even though Mercury is deconstructive, it still wants for there to not be any additional parts. Like if it's putting together a table and it winds up finding that there's extra screws and things like that, it doesn't want to just put them in the table to make them fit, like a Jupiter ruled sign would kind of want to do, so that everything has a place at least. It wants that to be a part of what was constructed so that it's constructed properly, but it would rather take the whole thing apart again and then figure out exactly where those were and take those extra steps. Whereas the Jupiter ruled signs might be okay with being a little bit more messy with it, as long as everything is taken into consideration. So what is interesting about the kind of atomization, universalization of the Mercury Jupiter ruled signs is that, especially in this time where people have become so polarized and there's this very strong us versus them kind of consideration going on. And keep in mind, just how fascinating it is that we've had the nodal axis in these signs for this time, and we've become so atomized, in particular around issues of gender. It's very weird, but this may be a way or a time for us to kind of reconsider that and reconsider the hard boundaries that we've created within our cultures to let's tease apart and deconstruct some of those hard borders, those walls that we have kind of built between us, and see, one, how we actually fit and don't fit, and two, how we can come to some sort of collective conclusion about something or another in order to start getting us on some sort of a similar page for when we start getting into the signs here, when the node continues to move on beyond 2027, when we're getting into the luminary and Saturn ruled signs, when we are really starting to consider how the collective and the individual and the personal come together in a way that is much more determined than you necessarily would get from these Mercury and Jupiter ruled signs that we will be experiencing from now until 2027. So all of that said, that's kind of the general considerations of what we will be looking at as we take this through the houses. So without any further ado, let's get into Aries Rising here. Okay, so for Aries Rising, we have the moon and the North Node are in the 12th and 1st houses. And then the sun and the South Node are in the 6th and 7th houses. So for you, a lot of what will be coming up in a very poignant and significant way that will be bringing some change and transformation within your life will be around themes of spirituality and the subconscious, potentially psychological complexes and psychological almost habits that you may not recognize that you engage in could be coming to light and being transformed in a very significant way. We can see therapy and doctors, like doctor-related work, come up very strongly in this period of time as well. But it's really about the unknown and what is isolated kind of coming to light to you, especially psychologically and especially in terms of your perspective. So things that you didn't know that were kind of within you coming to light in a way that can be very transformative and really ultimately very stunning and helpful. There may be things that come up where you need to go to, or you're hearing about someone who is in a hospital or a clinic or a home, or someone who is, for better or worse, locked away in some way. You may be feeling somewhat isolated from people, and that may also be in your own personal life. If you feel to some extent that people are falling away, that would also be a very natural way for this to play out, where you're shedding things that aren't for your good, and you are experiencing a lot of spiritual enlightenment and these kind of guided insights in that place of isolation for yourself. And again, additionally, matters of your or other people's health can come up very strongly throughout these years, as well as questions around productivity and work. So that coming potentially into a little bit of conflict with the spiritual direction that you're going in. So for instance, your work could clash with the amount of time that you are wanting to spend in meditation or with some new craft or practice that you are learning and studying, especially if you are self-learning something along those lines. There may be a change in the environment, the routine of your work in the coming years that will be quite significant, and where by the end of this, the work that you're doing looks quite a bit different than the way that it looks coming into this. And then again, that's going to change kind of your perspective on mundane matters of your tasks, your job, what you do each day, your routine, the errands that you run, the kind of daily life and the environment of that will also be transforming in this very significant way. And a lot of this will be coming through the kind of spiritual and subconscious transformation, where these things that you may not have been aware of are very significant to you are coming to light and kind of begging to be engaged with and addressed and incorporated into your life in these coming years. So Additionally, during this very period of time of the eclipse, we do want to look to the third house and the seventh house for some help. So you may be encountering some books or some groups of people or a specific person who is kind of helping you to develop in these ways off the bat with this eclipse as the kickoff point for all of this. But there may be something in the family that seems to be kind of pulling you back. So maybe this is a different perspective than your family typically takes. And you may feel a bit of a push and pull with regard to them about that. But these are the kind of transitory effects that are coming in specifically through this eclipse to be addressed off the bat. And then with additional eclipses, we will discuss them going forward. Even though some of the themes will be the same, a lot of the actors that are around that eclipse will be a little bit different. So little aspects of your life will be interacting with this transformation in different ways. And that's how that's coming through here, is some sort of communication or media from others is very helpful. And it's helping you to lead into initially this transformation that you're going toward here. But this may be in some sort of conflict with your home life or your family or something like that, where maybe they don't necessarily agree with that kind of perspective. So that is what I have for you, Aries Rising. Okay, so for Taurus Rising, we have the moon and the north node are in your 11th and your 12th houses, and then the sun and the north node are in your 5th and 6th houses. I swear at some point I need to actually just turn on the south node when I'm talking about the nodes so that I'm not just circling this nothing here. So with the moon in the 11th house, a lot of what is going to be transforming for you, a lot of what is going to be bringing in these kind of poignant events and significant changes that you'll be experiencing during this period of time in September and then continuing through 2027 will be around the groups of people that you are experiencing in your life. So I kind of want to tease that out. This could be your friends. This could be your work colleagues. This could be groups that you're involved in. This could be students like that you're also a student with, so your peers. This could be your family. It could be the people that are attached to your family. So this could be any kind of people that are generally around, with a special consideration for those kinds of people and organizations that in some way support your public standing, because this is the succeedant house after the 10th house. So this is affecting your public standing in some way. So this is like more so public sector. That's why I'm not saying so much your family as much as the people who are kind of attached to your family. This is a little bit broader than just the people who are in your home, but they could also play into that. So that's kind of what I want to point out there. Groups that you're involved in, career-related groups, student groups, community groups, church groups, spiritual groups, anything along those lines. Those will be very significant to you, and they will probably be changing in these years. You could also find yourself with these weird little luck and opportunity presenting itself to you in these really interesting ways around the eclipse seasons coming up through 2027. We'll go through all of those as they come up in future videos, and some of them will be outside of this Pisces Virgo axis, so I'll point those out when they come up. But for the most part, we will be experiencing eclipses in these signs in the coming years, and so you can rely on the fact that you will be seeing transformations, transitions, and changes associated with lucky breaks and opportunities, especially those which affect your public standing, your career, and the groups that you are surrounded with, including even your neighborhood and things like this. So possibly even moving into a different neighborhood due to a lucky break with income or something along those lines. So with the sun and the south node in the 5th and 6th houses, we have this presenting itself as your understanding of participation and belonging changing. So again, when the groups of people that you're hanging out with or that you're spending time with change, your sense of belonging with different identity groups, with different perspectives of yourself and of different perspectives of people within society, that changes. So hopefully you will be feeling as though you belong even more so by the end of this. And that is how I would expect for that to play out. If you have felt in the past as though you don't belong, then this would be a period of time where that should be falling away and where you should be able to not overthink that anymore and be able to feel more comfortable with other people. So children and creativity can come up with this as well. You may wind up having children. Your children may wind up having children throughout these couple of years. You may hear something along those lines of someone that you know wanting children with this first eclipse, and then you may find that they do have children within the coming years. There's something about children potentially coming into your life, but if it's not children, then the way that this comes through is creativity. So there could be some sort of creative purpose, artistic purpose that you're pursuing throughout this period of time that may come through in this initial eclipse as a muse or a flash of inspiration to pursue some sort of artistic or creative field. This can also come through in culture and enjoyment. So the types of culture, maybe the types of media that you enjoy, as well as how you enjoy it, with whom you enjoy that, and what it is about that you enjoy could change pretty drastically in the coming years as well, where what is falling away is something that you used to identify with, that you to some extent are possibly learning that you don't quite belong with that now, but you belong with something else now. And so you're kind of relating to culture and enjoyment and belonging and groups and your public standing and your participation in things evolving throughout throughout these years, to where by the end of this, you are experiencing all of that very differently than you did before this first eclipse here. And there's going to be a bit of a kickoff in this first eclipse toward that end. Now, additionally, during this specific eclipse, we see that you have some help in your second house and your sixth house. So again, these are financially and job-oriented signs. I would expect definitely some luck to come through in your career right around the time of this eclipse, especially even leading up to the eclipse. So in the coming days after I upload this video, we will have a grand trine, which will be between your financial houses of the 2nd, the 6th, and the 10th, when the moon is coming through here as well. So it looks to me like you may get some sort of interesting breakthrough within your career, even if it's a relationship that you are kind of starting to build with a colleague that can benefit you long term in a very significant way in the coming years. But you do want to be careful to communicate softly. So try not to be too aggressive in your communication throughout this period of time, because we have a little bit of trouble potentially in the third house of communications, of daily routines. You could wind up feeling a little bit impatient with people with this, and that could kind of get in the way of that luck and opportunity that's wanting to come through in your relationships for the sake of your career during these days. So that is what I have for you, Taurus Rising. Okay, so for Gemini Rising, we have the Moon and North Node in the 10th and 11th houses, and then we have the Sun and the South Node in the 4th and 5th houses. So this eclipse series is going to be angular for you, meaning that it is along the axis of these two angular houses of the 10th and the 4th houses. And that means that it is especially significant for you, both in terms of the eclipses, but also in terms of these years. So I do want to stress that these are very significant upcoming years in your life. generally speaking. Perhaps especially this coming year, as we have Jupiter also in the first house, but we will get to that in a second as well. So this moon in the 10th house, as we are receiving these eclipses, both this time and in the coming years, what is going to be transformed and transmuted and changed in these very poignant and significant ways, where your experience of life will be markedly different by the end of this than going into it, will be around issues of your career and public standing. Now, with the North Node coming into this should be quite good. This should be quite beneficial. And this is leading you toward a long-term direction. So you're really looking far into the future in terms of what it is that you're wanting to create in your life for yourself, for your future, as well as for your legacy with the 10th house here. Additionally, we will see a repetition of the importance and the significance of your purpose as well as your responsibility coming up. So you may find yourself with a lot more work to do within your career, where a lot more responsibility is being placed upon you in a series of kind of building on that sequence, where it may start out a little bit small. We still have that North Node in your 11th house. So you may still be relying a bit on colleagues to kind of help you out here and there, but there should be increasing self-reliance as we continue on through this series of eclipses, where you should be able to build yourself up with each, almost like a ladder. If you consider each eclipse to be kind of a rung on the ladder, you should be able to handle more and more as you are going along with that. And part of the reason for this is that what's becoming clear through these years is a lot more of your purpose in a deeply felt and very significant on a soul level way for you, as to why you're doing what you want to be doing in terms of your career, in terms of your long-term direction. Your why becomes a lot more clear with these eclipses. Now, with the sun in the 4th here, what else is being transformed through this, and what you are pulling on in terms of your experience, but additionally maybe falling away in certain specific ways, will be your origin narrative, your conception of where you come from and who you are originally. Your family, there may be major changes within your family in terms of additions or subtractions, or a reconfiguration of your relationships with your family or their relationships with each other in such a way as affects your relationships with them as well. And then also with your home and location. So one could very much expect to be moving with these eclipses as well, possibly very much around the time of one of these eclipses, but you could be moving your location due to something to do with your career, or your career may be taking you to different places, and it may be also changing your home. So for instance, if you are given a level of responsibility where now you are working from home, then that would change your home in a way. But you could move locally in order to have your home better suit your life as you're going forward and as you're making these very significant changes in the coming years, especially as regards your career, as well potentially as your earning potential. But you may also be moving in terms of to a different city. And that in itself could also be affecting your family or your relationships with your family. So very fundamental aspects of your life going through huge transformation throughout this period of time. Now, during this specific eclipse, we will look at each in turn in future videos. I do want to treat this particular eclipse based on your rising sign as well. And this one has a very nice feature for you, which I kind of alluded to here, which is that Jupiter is transiting your first house. It's transiting Gemini right now. And so This is bringing you a lot of luck and opportunity. It's bringing you a lot of attention. It's probably bringing just a lot of pretty pleasant things into your life right now. And at the time of this eclipse, so the kind of energetic signature of this eclipse for you is that it's making a trine to Venus in your fifth house. So this has a lot to do with self-expression and feeling that you are able to open up and express yourself in a way that maybe you haven't quite felt before, that is also contributing to this transformation for you, where you may be feeling more comfortable with yourself and your own joys and enjoying yourself more and your expression more and having a lot more faith in it and feeling better about it and getting a lot of positive feedback around that, which is egging on this transformation that you're experiencing in the coming years. So it's this spark point is coming from a place of self-expression and your own comfort and joy in that, and probably getting a lot of good feedback with regard to that as well. Now, we do have a bit of an issue in the second house of resources and finances in this eclipse here with Mars in Cancer in the second house. So this could bring up for the coming 3 to 6 months a little bit of, sorry, I didn't mean to pronounce that in a strange British way, a little bit of financial turbulence. So where it's back and forth, it's not just all bad. This Mars is ruled by the moon, which is a flow. It's an ebb and a flow. So you may experience financial highs and lows in the coming 3 to 6 months as you're making some sort of career transition during this period of time. But aside from that, that will move on by our next series of eclipses, which start in March. And that Mars will be moving on from Cancer entirely just a couple months after that as well. So something to keep in mind. We have this Jupiter in your first house is going to help you out a lot with that, but it's an underlying factor of try to save some money and try not to spend too much, because there may be ebbs and flows there that you'll want to keep in mind. Longest frame pretty much until June of next year, especially as we have around that same time that Mars moves on, we'll have Jupiter then move into that second house and clean up a lot of that mess and lead it to a just flow, no ebb. But until then, there's a need to be a little bit careful with the finances as you're making some sort of transitions with regard to your career and your living situation. So that is what I have for you, Gemini Rising. Okay, so for Cancer Rising, we have the Moon and North Node in the 9th and 10th houses, and we have the Sun and the South Node in the 3rd and 4th houses. So some of the issues that will be transforming and transmuting and changing in very significant and poignant ways in the coming years, kicking off with this first eclipse in Pisces, will be around matters of education and philosophy. So learning things, studying things, coursework, higher learning, as well as engagement with philosophies or ideologies, whether they be spiritual or political or social, even questions of things like business ethics or law, personal ethics, and how people are treated, as well as engagement with any sort of foreign materials or foreign philosophies or grand narratives that you haven't engaged with before that seem kind of alien or new or novel or strange. These could be coming into your consciousness and your perspective in a way that you haven't quite experienced before, or they could become very, very, very important to you during this period of time in a way that is transforming you and your life. So for instance, this could have to do with starting college or really amping up your coursework or working on a thesis or graduating or taking some sort of job training or engaging in your own personal study of a topic that feeds into either your career and public standing or your worldview in some way. Now, this could also come through as the effects of travel. So you may be moving away from a place that you have lived for a long time, a city that you've lived for a long time, or you could just be traveling away from that for the first time in a long time. And you may be engaging, for instance, in culture in such a way where you're able to understand your own culture better and you're able to understand other cultures better. And it's changing your worldview in a way that affects you and your personality and your perspective on the world. So the mind is being built up in a way that is making you a lot stronger and is transforming you in a way in the coming years, kicking off around this time. Now, with the sun in the third house, what could be changing especially would be the way that you are engaging with commerce, with your city, with how you spend your time, with your environment, with the people that you communicate with the way that you communicate with people, and the way that you kind of see people in terms of someone that you're engaging with or someone that you are communicating with. So in your daily life, maybe there have been certain people or certain groups of people that you interact with, and the way that you see them and therefore the way that you are engaging with them is changing in a significant way. And that could be due to family patterning or family conditioning that's falling away to some extent, as well as by getting out of that immediate origin environment and exploring something else, whether that be through books or education or physical traveling or spirituality or whatnot. Additionally, your peer group could be changing. So there could be some sort of transformation within your siblings or your friends or the people that you spend a lot of time with in your direct environment. They could be going through a lot of changes where you are then engaging with those changes. You know, if someone has a major perspective shift and they share that with you, then that can have a huge impact on you as well. And that's one vector through which these changes could reach you. And that would be through the falling away of an aspect of a peer, where that is then broadening your horizons as well. And that's kind of causing a similar thing to fall away from you as well. A perhaps previously somewhat rigid perspective or something that is loosening up and that's broadening your perspective. There may be aspects of your daily life that are also completely falling away, where maybe it was very important to you to have, for instance, a shopping day a month or something to like treat yourself in a kind of consumerism oriented way, like retail therapy. Maybe retail therapy is a part of your general broad routine. And that could also be something that would very naturally fall away with this set of eclipses, to where the environment would be changing by you engaging with those kinds of environments, those kinds of retail environments less, but additionally by then having fewer things to keep track of within your home would also change your environment. And you may also find that there are certain things about the locality. For instance, maybe you saw yourself in a specific neighborhood that you aspired to, that maybe there's a lot of wealth there, and maybe there's a lot of smart appliances and fancy things and nice cars, you know, and good schools and so on and so forth, all of that. Maybe that's something that you kind of always saw yourself aspiring to. And maybe you are learning certain things philosophically or about the world or about life itself through some kind of spiritual teacher, even if it's just a grandparent sharing to you what's important to them, or anyone else kind of sharing to you what's important to them and how they feel like what in life is actually really important. And that may be having an impact on you, where maybe you are then seeing yourself as, no, actually, I feel like if I were in that environment, I would be stressed out by the square footage to clean and so on and so forth. And there would be so much to take into consideration and it would stress me out. And so maybe your broadened perspective is actually having you aspire to some sort of, you know, tiny home situation, or some sort of just, maybe you want to own a condo and not worry about yards or things like that. So it could change your entire worldview, but also in a way that completely shifts the kind of local environment, not only that you're in, but that you see yourself in. And this will probably also have ramifications on, or almost be ramifications of, some changes that you have experienced within your career and family life recently as well. Now, during this eclipse in particular, in future eclipses, I will take us through all of them, and I will point out what is interesting that is happening concurrently with them. So the energy signature of that eclipse and how that as well is impacting your chart. But let's look at this one in particular, and this will carry us through approximately March of next year when we have our next set series of eclipses coming up. So for this one, we have Jupiter is in your 12th house, and that is trine to Venus, which is in your 4th house. So again, like I was saying, that grandparent saying something that has a big impact on you could definitely be something that comes up, or maybe a way of looking at your ancestry or where you've come from in a way that is very different from the way that you've always imagined it. So your origin narrative really changing in a very pleasant and positive way, or someone from that origin point, a grandparent or a parent or an aunt or uncle, probably an elder, or even the way that someone else in your family has kind of reimagined that line that you come from and what that lineage means to you. That could kick off a lot of this perspective change as well. Now, there may even be someone that you identify with strongly in a way that you don't fully understand, who's in your environment, especially if you were in some sort of education environment or a different country or something like this, somewhere outside of the norm, where the way that they see themselves and the fact that you identify with them is also changing the way that you see yourself and your place in the world, and so on and so forth. Now, there could be, with Mars in the 1st house, with Cancer rising here, a bit of a tendency to grasp onto what you feel secure in during this period of time. And so there's a bit of a warning around that, where being able to release and let go and not feel a defensive reaction when what you've known to be true kind of starts to slip, because this is a really wonderful change that's coming in for you. It's very helpful and nice, but during this set of eclipses, and then also during the next set of eclipses, Mars will be in that 1st house. So you might feel a bit of a reactive resistance to making some of these changes. And so I would hope that that is not the case, because then that could cause it to be forced on you, which is another signification of Mars in the 1st house, which would be force upon you. So if you resist too much, then this could come through in a way that you have a little bit less control over. Let me put it that way. So not resisting will be very, very important throughout this period of time, but do understand that your self-image will be ebbing and flowing. It will be shifting, and to try and really accept that. Now, it may be shaken pretty hard during this eclipse, and I don't mean for that to scare you. Again, I think this is a wonderful thing, but I do want to point out, your ruler is the moon, your chart ruler, your ascendant ruler is the moon. The moon is going through the eclipse right now, and you have Mars in your 1st house, which is also exactly square to this nodal axis currently. These are pretty powerful signatures for you in particular as a Cancer rising. So I would expect for this eclipse to have a very strong impact, but again, it's a very wonderful impact. And do keep in mind that Jupiter in the 12th house can offer a huge amount of psychic protection to you. So I wouldn't be worried about feeling like your identity is just going to crumble away to nothing. No, it's just shifting so that it can grow. That's all. It's kind of like the experience of when you have a seed that's kind of, gestating, whatever that word is. I'm not into gardening, but I can at least offer this image to you. When that seed first breaks apart, that's probably a pretty terrifying moment for that plant, but it's the critical moment when it starts to grow. So if you're kind of feeling like that at all during this period of time, do try to relax around it and understand that this is for you and it's a growth period in order for this to be experienced in the smoothest and most beneficial way possible for you. So that is what I have for you, Cancer Rising. Okay, so for Leo Rising, we have the Moon and the North Node in the 8th and 9th houses. And we have the Sun and South Node in the 2nd and 3rd houses. So this transformative situation marked by these kind of pronounced and poignant events that change and shift things in your life will be related to matters of joint resources. So contracts that you have with others, leases or mortgages that you've signed with others, marriage contracts, loans that you have taken out, loans that you have offered, agreements that you have made with other people will come up in a very significant way. And that can come through as either somehow helpful. If you were in a position of, for instance, needing someone to co-sign something, there may be someone who comes through in a pinch that way. I would question whether that is the best for you, certainly, and interrogate that to some extent on your own as to whether you really do want to be signing anything with someone. That will be a very important question for anything that you're signing with someone, including with an institution, a contract that you're signing with an institution. Because what we might want to avoid, as this will be coming up as a very important kind of transformative lesson in these coming years, is matters of dependency. So that will probably be somewhat unavoidable anyway. I don't think it would be the end of the world if you did wind up getting into some sort of contract that turned out a little bit weird and where you needed to kind of learn a lesson around that, because the lesson does need to come through. But there could be someone that becomes quite dependent upon you in a way that might not be the healthiest, or you could wind up dependent on someone else in a way that's not necessarily the healthiest. And there's some sort of lesson, especially a psychological lesson, probably around boundaries and dependencies and things like that, as well as where one doesn't value themselves enough in terms of the 8th house. So those kind of subconscious fears, as well as subconscious kind of complexes that we can have around ourselves and what we deserve, that will be coming up very strongly for you. Now, this doesn't just have to do with financial dependencies or financial contracts. This could also be related to relationships. So you may find during this period of time that you're learning a lot of really transformative and significant and poignant lessons for yourself around getting into relationships with people that maybe you deserve better than that from. And that can be, of course, quite difficult. 8th house transits are not the easiest, but they are perhaps ultimately the most valuable, because, if we don't learn these lessons, and often we don't recognize that we need these lessons because of the fact that it's this subconscious thing, because of the fact that this is like depth psychology, where the universe kind of really has to gouge at us and trigger pretty hard in order to get these things up into the conscious so that we can address it, So big questions coming up around self-worth and where you undervalue yourself and where you accept less than what you deserve, and where you feel that you can't do something on your own, that you need someone else in order to accomplish something. The lesson here ultimately is going to be sometimes people can help you. And that's wonderful. And if you have people in your life that come through in that way, reliably and that you know well, that's absolutely wonderful. But there could also be some very charming other people that come in, or some offers from companies that almost seem too good to be true, and that you may get involved with where you find that, yeah, they were. So that is something to kind of keep an eye open for. But again, it's not the end of the world. We do have something here that can help you out quite a bit, as well as here. And we'll get into that in a second. But, there's something very important about that that's coming through during this time. I went through a transit like that and I wouldn't trade it. It was intense, I will say, but I wouldn't trade it because the lesson was too important. So, and if you had told me ahead of time, oh, you need to learn lessons around self-worth and blah, 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 and I would have been like, no, it's fine, because I just didn't realize. So now with the sun and the south node in the second and third houses here, related to these changes will be questions around resources and possessions. And again, how important are those things actually to you? Do you really value material things, or do you value a sense of security in a different way where you feel secure in yourself, but maybe you feel a little bit less secure in your finances, but ultimately you're actually more secure in them because you're self-reliant? Those things can come up very importantly as well. And do you really need to have access to all of the possessions that you currently have access to based on your connection to someone else? Can you build up that access on your own so that it is a genuine resource of yours that can't be withheld or denied based on any sort of psychological kind of need-based manipulation coming from anything that could be acting in your eighth house, which is related to other people and your dependency upon them. This is self-dependency that is based upon you, the first house here. So the second house builds on that. This is your security based on other people. So again, income and finance could be transforming in a very important way. And that may be with you becoming more self-reliant, where your doubts of yourself with regard to your ability to take care of yourself, or even flipping this on its head, if someone's been dependent upon you, where you feel the need to take from your own resources, your own finance, your own income to support someone else, because you feel some sense of value or self-worth based on your compassion for someone else, where it's becoming kind of unhealthy, where you are giving too much and it's not even helping them because they need to become self-reliant as well. That could also be something where you're kind of needing to pull away at that second house consideration of either a fear around security or a sense of guilt and duty that is based upon a value system that you have, which may be absolutely wonderful, of taking care of other people, but ultimately you may need to rethink it because it may be playing out currently in a way that isn't helpful to you. It may be digging into your ability to save for your own future, but it may also not be helping the person that you are immediately financially helping, because they may not be able to learn to be self-reliant if they're being taken care of. I may be belaboring the point. I'm pretty sure that that's quite clear at this point. Now, we also have during this particular eclipse, and for each eclipse going forward, I will always take into consideration the kind of particular signature of that eclipse and where the other planets are at that time. But suffice it to say that for now, and the eclipse energy signature that you're going to be carrying with you for the coming 6 months until March, when we have our next eclipses, what we have is Jupiter in your 11th house and Venus in your 3rd house. Now, what I love about this is that what I worry about, because this is how I get triggered around the 8th house, is that there may be someone that you're relying upon that isn't actually all there or really for you. What I love about this is that there are definitely people that are for you in your environment. They're available and they really do want to help. So even if there's a bad actor in the mix, you're fine because there's a broader support system for you. So if you feel like you have created an unhealthy attachment with someone, especially with regard to any sort of dependency, whether it be emotional, mental, sexual, physical, or financial, even if it has to do with someone that is, for instance, in your home that you live with, right? Where you've signed a lease with them, that you're kind of contractually obligated to them somehow. What we see here is you may be a little bit afraid of both that connection and breaking off that connection. But the antidote to this, if this is something that's coming up for you in a poignant way right now, is to ask for help from others because it's available in spades here. And these are actors that are fully capable of helping you. They are probably within your peer groups, people of a similar age to you, siblings, friends. Third house with Venus in the third house, they really want to help you. But there's also this trine aspect to where it's additionally your colleagues, again, your friends. So we have a double signification of you have friends who want to help you here and who are capable of, as well as groups and organizations that are in the area. So even if, you know, you need to reach out to a support line or something, or even, you know, ask in a comment here for advice. There may be people just around here who are capable of giving you some guidance in terms of how to kind of address something, and maybe could even just give you a word with the third house. You may just need some communication of confirmation of something that you're kind of feeling here. Now, we have Mars in the 12th house, and that's a little bit additionally of why I feel like there could be a bad actor that is becoming apparent to you in this period of time. And it may not even be that they're a bad person, but that the relationship itself is not quite healthy. And this, I think, is something that is very subconscious because we have a bit of a problem in the house of your subconscious right now, and the house of, quote, hidden enemies, and the house of hidden, isolated things, as well as a shock to the system to an extent where things are shifting in these kind of, you know, mysterious and interesting ways. Also in the eighth house of psychology and the subconscious and things that can be obscured or hidden or occulted. So this is quite fascinating. In terms of if this is something that you're afraid of, where you feel like you may want to utilize some psychic protection, you know, black tourmaline, smudging, things like that, just your basics. If that helps you to feel more secure, I would totally lean into that and totally do that. But I wouldn't fear too much here because I feel like that is a lot of the problem, is the fear here. Because if there weren't fear, then you would just recognize your relationships for what they are in an honest way. And you would recognize the power that you have, which is complete over your own self. And you would recognize the resources that you have in terms of friends and colleagues and, you know, even just comrades or, you know, fellow travelers out there in the world who can offer a word of advice to you. We have a lot of that, words helping you a lot with Jupiter and Gemini, and then this Venus here in the third house, as well as friendship. These are very lovely resources that you have just adjacent to you that you can ask for. So that's kind of a lot of the signature of this. If you're going through a hard time, do know there's so many resources available to you right now. And if you're feeling guilty right now about a relationship of dependency that has been built up upon you, maybe a couple words here that could be interesting to you. I know that Mel Robbins is on YouTube, and she interviews a lot of people that are very interesting in terms of relationships and self-worth and things like this, as well as, and then also dependencies upon you. She would also have people that she's interviewed that could help with that. And then also Dr. Ramani on YouTube talks a ton about healthy and unhealthy relationship building. And if you're feeling guilty about maybe cutting someone off or something like that, then those resources could also help you. So, on both sides of that equation. But yeah, that is what I have for you, Leo Rising. I hope it's not frightening. It's just that there's something here about your security that's being shaken up in a really wonderful way. But I do feel like the initial kick here could be a little bit unsettling, is all. So yeah, hopefully not. Hopefully I'm completely wrong on that. And definitely let me know kind of how you're experiencing this, because it's a pretty fascinating alignment for you, Leo Rising. Okay, so for Virgo rising, we have the moon and north node are in the seventh and eighth houses, and then the sun and the south node are in the first and the second houses. So, one thing I want to say off of the bat, which I will be saying to all of the mutable signs, is that this is happening in angular houses for you. So, of course, the nodal axis is moving into your first house because the south node is moving into your first house. So, not only does this indicate a special significance of these eclipses for you, so you'll want to pay attention to the eclipses especially strongly, but what this additionally represents is that these will be very important years for you, generally speaking. So, the changes that you will be experiencing through these years will have a very important and poignant long term impact on your life, generally speaking, that is very significant. So, with that said, what we see around that kind of transformation and these sudden insights and these poignant events and happenings that kind of change things up and shake things up for you in a way that affects your experience of life now versus that being completely different on the other side of this series of eclipses in the coming years will be impacting primarily your relationships with others, as well as how others kind of approach you and how you approach them. So, this could come through as the initiation of some very important relationships to you, ones that play out. Sorry, I'm feeling very like I have a lot of saliva in my mouth right now. This being sick is so weird. And so, I'm hoping that it's not making gross mouth noises because that is a huge pet peeve of mine. And sorry to go off on a tangent of that, but I can kind of feel it. So, I'm going to back off the mic a little bit so that that doesn't come through. So, you could have some very significant relationships initiate during this time. You could be meeting a partner, a future marriage partner, or a future best friend, or a future mentor or teacher, or a future very important boss. Establishing very important relationships through this period of time. Now, other relationships may also fall away. And a lot of what this is kind of bringing to you is it's not only transforming who's in your life, but part of why the people in your life are changing in terms of who is why and how. So, what's actually ultimately changing here is how you relate to others, is how you see yourself, how you see others, and your relationship to them, and what that means to you. And so that naturally is going to kind of magnify, not magnify, magnetize, is the word I'm looking for there, different types of people and different types of relationships to you. So the way that you did friendship before may be very different from the friendships that the way that you're doing friendships in a couple of years from now through the series of shifts and changes and evolution that you're going through in these coming years. Now, also contracts and agreements, we can see matters of the law coming through with the seventh house as well, but contracts may change with people or even with institutions. So This could come through as signing one of your first contracts in a certain area. So, for instance, the seventh house in particular isn't really a financial house, but we do still have that nodal axis along that 8-2 axis here. So, this could be signing your first car loan, getting a mortgage for the first time. This could be, of course, a marriage contract that you're signing for the first time, or a divorce, agreement that you're coming to. And we don't really think of these as necessarily legal matters, but all contracts really are ultimately. And then not only those legal contracts, but also then those kind of spiritual or moral agreements that we make with others when they're friends with us. We have certain expectations, and not only of them, but also of ourselves and our behavior toward each other. And that's what makes and breaks friendships is, does someone come through in the way that you need them to? Do they treat you in a way that makes you happy? That's ultimately what a friend is. And so if people don't treat you that way, if people don't come through for you in that way, or if you don't feel like coming through to someone in that way as well, then those kind of agreements that are more spiritual or emotional or moral that you build with friends and even with family, but especially with others with whom you're probably not like blood related, those agreements and expectations that you have with others simply based on your moral framework of how relationships work, what a relationship means to you, in terms also of friendship, that will be transforming during this time. And so this is why it's like there will be people who are magnetized to you who are of a different kind of type. And then people falling away that maybe you didn't quite expect to, because they were fitting, you two together were fitting into a specific mold of a concept of a relationship just fine, but maybe that mold is changing. And so maybe it's just not fitting as well anymore. And there could even be then that could break down through an argument, which is also another first house, seventh house thing, where it's that opposition of that kind of dialogue and dialectic between planets or positions that are, quote, opposite to each other. Now, we could also consider the general significations also of the signs in question here. Now, the North Node can't enter your seventh house without entering Pisces, if we're using the whole sign system. It can't do that. So we do want to kind of keep an open mind as to how these things kind of play out. But it is entering Pisces, and Pisces is your seventh house. So these kind of general considerations of questions of health, questions of boundaries, questions of spirituality and philosophy, questions of dreams and practical plans and support and service may also be kind of woven into a lot of these changes that you're experiencing around the way that you view yourself and the way that you view others and the way that you view that mold of that relationship and the expectations with regard to each other there. And so those matters may come up as these kind of either little fascinating adjacent points to these things, or they may be very fundamental to why that is changing. So, for instance, you could have a severing of a friendship with someone over spiritual disagreements, or over questions of boundaries, or over questions of them not coming through for you when you had a health crisis or something like this. So that's how those things could kind of play out for you in a way that really transforms your life and also your expectations. You now know, okay, my boundaries have changed, so the mold of expectations of my relationships has changed. So I will need different types of people in my life if people aren't meeting those expectations going forward. So that there's that kind of interplay there where that plays out. So again, additionally, we have that sun in the first house. So again, the south node is moving over here. So this is a lot of, there are aspects here that are kind of falling away with this eclipse and then the series of eclipses that we're experiencing in these coming years. So there will be things that you think about yourself and your personality that you're shedding. It's like you're shedding a skin here with the what's considered the tail of the dragon, the south node coming into this and shedding with these eclipses of parts of you off. And so you may find yourself changing things around your body or changing your perspective of your body even. There can be times where you just, over the course of a month or two, you look in the mirror and you feel like you look so much different, but you know that physically you look the same. It's just that you are perceiving of yourself so much differently. So this is something that you can definitely expect to be experiencing during this time and then in the coming years, but also then the way that you present yourself. So maybe you like what you see in the mirror a lot more, and so you are presenting yourself in a much more confident way, and that kind of gets a better reaction than presenting yourself in a self-conscious way and then having people question you. And therefore it builds up that better physical, like body image, that confidence around yourself and your personality. And so therefore your personality shifts in a way that's healthier. All of these things kind of going together and building you up by tearing away certain things that haven't been helping you in terms of how you see yourself and how you present yourself even, because of how you see yourself, Again, also that changes the intention and the energy. So this can bring, therefore, a lot more confidence, and you can go after things, and your intention can express in a much more assured way. And so you can have fewer false starts, which again cycles back into that confidence, where the energy with which you go after something is much more certain that it's going to be successful, and therefore it has a much higher chance of being successful and continuing to feed into that cycle. So this is a really beautiful alignment for you in the coming years. And what is transforming for you is just so fundamental and also just incredibly healthy, where it's your very self that is changing, but in a way that I don't think is actually going to be that scary or even that shocking. I feel like when I look at this, that this is the kind of situation where you will be taking those, day to day steps, and things will be changing and things will be plodding along. And then by the end of this, by like 2027, when you look back on yourself in 2024, it will be that kind of lack of recognition of, wow, why did I even feel that way? Why did I even have those doubts? Why did I even think that the expectations that I had within relationships were sufficient at that time, So that's really how this will be playing out for you. Now, in this particular eclipse in September, and I'll look at every eclipse going forward, and we'll look at the particular signatures of each of them. And this one's going to carry through till March, when we have a new set of eclipses. But the signature of this one has Venus in your second house and Jupiter in your 10th house. And so there's a lot of help for you, and these are trying to each other. So their kind of positive influence over the situation is heightened, and it's working together. So this is something that we want to utilize for sure. Is this looks really, really beneficial to you also for your income and your career and your public standing. And that may be a bit of what is giving you that kind of kick in the pants to raise your standards with regard to relationships and contracts. That could be why you would be signing a new contract for something or getting a mortgage or something. It's like, okay, well, I have the money now, and so I'm doing this kind of new thing. And so that is also helping you to feel more self-secure going forward as well. Now, there is a little bit of an issue with Mars in the 11th house, and this is quite fascinating because a lot of the assumptions underlying everything that I have been saying have been that there would be people in your life that aren't meeting your expectations, or people that would be a little bit problematic. And of course, with eclipses and with shifts and changes within your relationships, that is kind of inherent, but we do actually kind of see that playing out with this Mars in the 11th house here. So the 11th house has to do with colleagues and people in the general environment supportive of your career and your public standing. It can also be friends and the groups and organizations that you're involved with. So it is very much related also to your relationships, similar to the 7th house, but this is the actual kind of people involved more so. Now, we see a problem there. And so there may be an increased self-sufficiency here that is making you feel kind of better about that. This could be someone who is jealous and who is behaving in a certain way in reaction to that. And you're kind of recognizing, wait, this is kind of something that they've been doing for a while. And why do I have this person in my life? And so that could come through in that way. It could also be someone who's a little bit aggressive, or just someone who is maybe a little bit selfish and self-serving, and therefore there is an imbalance in those expectations there. But there's probably a trigger here of a problematic person that is also almost an instigation for you in this much more confident energy to again reevaluate those relationships. So that's what's kind of kicking this off here this time around. So that is what I have for you, Virgo Rising. Okay, so for Libra Rising, we have the Moon and North Node in your 6th and 7th houses, and we have the Sun and South Node in the 12th and 1st houses here. So I do want to say off the bat that you are probably moving out of a phase of a huge amount of change and transformation as it is with regard to yourself and your relationships and so on and so forth in recent years. And what we see here is a shift of focus from self and others to kind of the more health oriented, spirituality oriented, and boundaries and health of relationships oriented axis here. So that is kind of something to keep in mind. There's probably a follow on of reevaluating how things impact you on a more subtle level now. So now that you've dealt with like the big chunks of eclipses in your 1st and 7th houses for a while, which were very, very fundamental. So a lot of subconscious cleanup here. Now, with the Moon in the 6th house, what we will see in the coming years is that what will be quite significant for you will be matters of your health or others' health. So you may find some sort of health routine that you're following now or that you're put on. And there may be someone else around you that you might be needing to support, or that you are kind of seeing go through a similar experience of some sort of health regimen, or kind of trying to come into healthier habits, especially. But this could also be in terms of clinical appointments and things like that that become a bit routine in order to build up someone's health. So it could be gym, it could be diet, it could be clinical appointments, it could be creating healthier habits that would be playing out in. Now, there's also questions around your productivity and your work, where that is shifting. The way that you do your work, the way that you do your job day to day is fundamentally changing during this period of time. So again, that daily routine will be certainly very significantly different in 2027 than it has been this year, but there may be a bit of a kick around that during this eclipse where you feel like your routine is somehow disrupted. And again, this is routine not just in terms of your work or your job, but it's tasks in general. So also mundane matters of taking care of yourself and your body, and taking care of your children and their health and their general routine, and you know, cooking dinner and running errands and making sure that the bills are paid and all of this. So there's something that's fundamentally changing that during this eclipse in September is probably disrupted in a way, but is fundamentally changing in the coming years to where that will shift in a pretty extreme way. And that could also have to do with the way that relationships were in the past, probably having changed over recent years as well. Maybe there's different people in your life, and that has also changed your routine to some extent, starting now, but then continuing to change as that relationship develops in the coming years as well. So with the sun in the 12th house, what we see is that you will also be transforming in terms of your kind of spirituality. Now, considering we have the south node on this side here, there's probably parts of yourself that you have kind of shed away, like shedding a skin almost over the past couple of years. And you may find that that is impacting you spiritually now to where you feel kind of like you are fresh, but maybe there's even certain resistances to certain types of spirituality or something that have also been peeled away to where you are kind of able to encounter those topics in a way that is very different than before and will continue to evolve. And that in itself, that engagement with spirituality and your own subconscious, which we'll get into in a second, will continue to evolve that relationship that you have with yourself by peeling off more and more of certain types of ego considerations beyond the skin that has been shed in recent years. So additionally, with this being the house of the subconscious, this will also be impacting you psychologically in terms of you will be peeling off layers of subconscious perspectives that are coming into your consciousness one by one that you may be kind of surprised to know were there as part of your psyche. And so you will be, again, with this kind of, there's a fascinating ego death that is implied with the south node moving through the first house and then moving into the 12th house. It's actually really beautiful and super healthy, where you're kind of continuing that process, but it's almost, it's less extreme and more subtle now, to where it's happening in this very healthy way of any of those residual issues that you just kind of didn't know about. As they come up, you're able to peel them away and release them. Now, there could also be some weird stuff happening behind the scenes, especially around the eclipses. So if you have recently become pretty spiritual, you may find weird kind of interesting paranormal things occurring around you that you are then kind of suddenly engaging in. And that may be something that is kind of fundamental to you, where you then can't go back. It's like a point of no return, where when you engage with those kinds of paranormal things, where you can't then pretend that you don't know about this going forward, you know? So additionally, issues of isolation and then subconscious identity can come through. So that is one thing that we want to watch out for, is the subconscious identity thing. What are you identifying with that you might not be fully conscious of? Digging that up and interrogating that could be pretty fascinating. What are all of the things that you identify with, even as broad as like earthling? And that's very true. But what does that bring to your perspective? And how is that even potentially limiting your perspective? Because this is also a house of the universal. So it's like there's something that's wanting to break open to this kind of universal perspective. But every identity that you have on yourself, even the true ones, and even the ones that are very considerate of what is outside of it, also interrogating that and considering how does that shape your perspective could be very transformative in a way that can kind of crack open the, say, like third eye or crown chakra at different moments as well. And that will probably be experienced in isolation with the 12th house being here. A lot of that shedding of skin and so forth, rather than being done in a way that is very publicly noticeable and again, very extreme and big, like has been happening over the past few years. This is again, very much more subtle. And it's something that you will become aware of, but probably will not be immediately apparent to others that you're going through this kind of evolution during this period of time. So during this particular eclipse, the signature of this one, which will carry through until the next series of eclipses that start in March, and I will look at those as we come to them as well. But for this 6 months, what we will be engaging with, and what you will be engaging with in particular, is that Jupiter is in the 9th house and Venus now is in the 1st house. So this is really lovely. Again, there's this reinforcement of this, the fact that you've come into a new spiritual understanding, very likely super open-minded right now with regard to philosophy and spirituality. You're probably learning a lot around those topics. You may even be engaging in some sort of formal training, or you may be traveling during this period of time and experiencing the world through that lens of different types of people and how they live their lives and what's important to them and what they consider healthy and so on and so forth. And that is helping you to kick off this new phase of transformation and increasing health and creating a routine that works for you and your new life better and is also healthier for you both physically and spiritually. Now, with Venus in the 1st house, also in Libra, this is really, really wonderful. Probably recently has been a decent time for you, is what I would certainly expect. And you may be feeling more confident than usual during this period of time. And again, this signature is carrying with you for some months. So this new perspective that you have of yourself from the changes that have been made over the past couple of years is sticking with you throughout this period of time, the 6 months, in the sense of you feeling really, really good and solid with regard to yourself. You feeling that you are in balance, that your relationships are likely developing in a way that is healthier, especially with that opposition to Chiron, which is in the 7th house, which has to do with health and teaching and wounds and things like that, that you've looked at over the past couple of years, especially as the North Node was crossing that earlier this year, if I am remembering correctly. You have those lessons and you're very much aware, consciously aware of the fact that you've gone through some very interesting stuff that has caused you to grow a lot in recent years. And there's a sense of goodwill within yourself now and more comfort and balance within yourself. Now, there could be some interesting disruptions or complications within your career or your public standing during this time. So that is something to keep an eye open for now. This could just be changes. This could just be that you're going from one career to another and you're kind of having to adjust to the people that are maybe a little bit different or the role that is a little bit different. And so try not to allow for fear or aggression to impact these changes too much with regard to, oh gosh, how is all of this that I'm experiencing right now going to affect my career? There's some level of fear around that right now that you don't necessarily want to lean into too much. There may even be a matter of right now needing to not overemphasize the career in its significance to you, and rather getting through the day with the 6th house consideration here, getting through the routine, doing the things that need to be done without continually stressing during that time, and then also during your free hours about your career and the direction of it. I would kind of put that aside for now. It will develop on its own. It looks to me like what you need to focus on more so right now is making sure that the routine that you have and that the environment that you are experiencing, both in terms of your own psychology as well as your physical environment, are healthy and that they're working for you. So that's what I would be more so focused on. And the career will kind of take care of itself as long as you are doing the work that you need to do. So rather than striving for accomplishment right now, what you're being directed toward is striving toward health and spiritual balance, and potentially even spiritual awakening, if that's something that you're after. So that is what I have for you, Libra Rising. Okay, so for Scorpio Rising, we have the Moon and North Node in the 5th and 6th houses. And we have the Sun and South Node in the 11th and the 12th houses. So the transformation and evolution and poignant sudden shifts and events that will be arising for you during this time, as well as in the coming years, will be around issues of participation and belonging. So how is it that you spend time with others? What is it that you do with people and with whom? And do you feel as though you belong in some groups versus others? That will be shifting and changing during this period of time. So you may find yourself participating in different types of activities, very different in a couple years from now than you have been previously in this year. You may also feel that you belong with different types of people than you have before. And this could come through in an instance, for instance, now, in a sense of feeling that you don't belong with, or that you don't enjoy participating with or engaging with certain types of people and activities that you have been for some time. And this can be the initial kind of push. So that is something that we want to keep in mind, is that often the urge can be a discomfort with what is that pushes you toward something that is new, that you enjoy more. But this could also just come through as these new things coming to you before you start losing interest in the others. And it may be a matter of the transformation coming through having too many activities to do, and needing to release some and leaning into the ones that are newer and that are growing you in a new way. And so that's how that kind of transformation would come through. Now, there could also be questions around children and creativity. So children coming into your life or even leaving your life. This could be having children or suddenly wanting to have children, or siblings or peers having children, or coming into contact with kids in some element of your life. Even just becoming more concerned around children in general, whereas maybe there wasn't as much thought put into that previously. Now, additionally / alternatively, because a lot of the significations that bring children to the 5th house also brings creativity to the 5th house, this could simply be in terms of artistic or creative engagements. So you may find some sort of new medium that you enjoy as some kind of as an activity of expression. So some sort of new type of art, or some sort of new sport that is allowing for you to express yourself in a way that you very much enjoy. This could also have to do with a craft or a trade where you create things. And so if that is something that you engage in, if you are a craftsman or a tradesman, then you may find that you are creating very different types of things by the end of this series of eclipses than you have been previously. So for instance, even if you are a painter, then the style that you paint in could change very fundamentally. And it would be due to these kind of really poignant events and circumstances around what it is that you genuinely enjoy, which would be pushing that forward. Alternatively, if you were a welder and you were working on pipelines and then an opportunity arose, because this can also bring in a lot of opportunities, to work in a safer environment, say making some kind of frames for something that still paid quite well. And maybe then you would be doing that and it would be still your craft, but it would be that you were creating something that was very different by the end of that and through that transformation. Now, this could also impact in a very significant way the types of culture and entertainment that you enjoy and why you enjoy it and the extent to which you enjoy it. So, if you have enjoyed certain genres over others, you could see a very strong change with regard to that in terms of music or movies or television or events out in the community. If you, again, like certain types of sports, you may find that you enjoy a different type of sports. And along those lines, during the eclipses, the narrow kind of eclipse periods, several weeks on either side, let's say 3 weeks or so on either side of these eclipses, you may experience cultural events that you find have a huge impact on you as well. And you may additionally meet people at events like that that wind up being quite significant to you in terms of friendship and also colleagues. So potential networking opportunities, even around fun cultural events. Now, we also have, of course, this sun in the 11th house. So some of the things that are transforming in terms of kind of some of it shedding away, but also just refining and changing shape in accordance to the needs of the fifth house. As the North Node moves into the fifth house, will be groups and colleagues. So you may find that you are not associating as much with certain groups, with certain friends, with certain colleagues. You may have a different group of colleagues if there's some sort of change in the work environment or the career. You may find that your general identity kind of shifts a little bit as well. So those that you identify with could shift in a very significant way, especially within the community or within society. So even political allegiances and alignments, as well as ideological identifications, will shift and change during this period of time. And a lot of that will be of a type of shedding to where you're actually just not identifying as much with what you have before. And that may also be why some of those groups or friends are falling away as well. They may have been tied into an identity that you may not hold anymore, or an ideology that you may not hold anymore. You may also receive some significant opportunities and luck in your career that takes you in a different direction and brings you into different groups of people, brings you into different kinds of activities and engagements and things like this that go along with just identifying with and engaging with different types of people. And a lot of this luck and these opportunities will also lead to you having new types of support and new supports within your colleague groups and so forth with regard to your public standing. So it's transforming the support system for your public standing to some extent, which is to say networking groups, those that you would call on for, say, a reference, or those who would say to you, hey, there's this opportunity here, and I just wanted to give you a heads up. Those kinds of support systems, or even, again, friends or professional groups that you're engaged with. So sudden events and opportunities coming through those as well. So even though some of those things may be shedding away, that's not an indication that you shouldn't be engaging in those matters. It's that those matters are being called to shift for you. So there may be new groups of people that have, you know, newer and better opportunities for you, but it's going to take kind of getting out of the comfort zone of what you already know to step into those scenes in order to have those opportunities presented to you. So additionally, we have some very interesting signatures for you from this full moon eclipse in September. This will carry through for you for about 6 months. And with each set of eclipses, I will look through them and look at the kind of signature of the eclipse itself and how it's affecting your chart. So for this one in particular, we have Jupiter is in your 8th house and Venus is in your 12th house. So these are very subconscious, hidden, and psychological houses, as well as somewhat spiritual houses. So there's a lot of help for you in those areas, which is quite fascinating. So there's something about your psyche or your mental health, emotional, spiritual health, and your perspective there that's very much helping you. And there may also be some weird synchronicities that you're experiencing during this time that also help to realign you in the ways that I've mentioned, which would be very helpful to you. And you're probably getting hints from your environment in a synchronistic type of way, which are indicating to you specifically how it is that aspects of your worldview and aspects of your identity are not helpful to you. So probably particular aspects, not the whole thing, you know, but there's probably, with Mars here in the 9th house of the worldview, as well as philosophy, ideology, there could be issues of someone who's overseas as well, or something that you're having to learn, or training or education or something like this. But the way that I would definitely see this coming through, given the big picture here, is that there may be certain aspects of the worldview that kind of need to be shed and that are proving a little bit problematic. And there are likely to be synchronicities around that bring to your attention the fact that maybe there are little things that you need to shed with regard to your perspective and your philosophy. This could also indicate that some of what you've been holding on to in terms of the groups that you engage with or identify with could be related to something that you have become attached to in an educational environment, or is somewhat distant from you or foreign from you in some way. So, for instance, say you spent a lot of time with a specific group of people in college, and those are the people that you still rely on to network in your career with, but maybe they haven't matured quite in the way that you have. Maybe you've just grown apart in certain ways, and they could be holding you back in some sense. Now, additionally, there could be, for instance, if you live in a specific country and you consume media from a different country or something like this, then maybe there are some perspectives in that worldview that isn't quite matching up with your own personal standing, your own personal, like, public standing in the world in terms of personal and professional opportunities. And again, perhaps there are some perspectives that you have picked up in those environments or from things that you read previously and identified with and made sense to you, that you kind of hold with you as assumptions or ways that you see the world that are no longer really serving you and are actually kind of getting in the way of your own personal advancement. And whatever these things are, there's probably some level of defensiveness around it. So it may not be easy to let go of. And obviously, we don't want to be letting go of things that aren't proving problematic. I would really look for synchronicities within the environment around a lack of health for you around those specific things that may be coming through. Because there's help for you in the ether of understanding what's good and what's not. So I would wait for that to become clear in that way rather than going off of any assumptions and necessarily shedding anything that's not necessary to shed. So that is what I have for you, Scorpio Rising. I hope that makes sense. It's a very fascinating alignment, as always. And yeah, I hope that's pretty understandable. A lot of what we're looking for here is moving toward the future, moving toward an environment and a culture and a kind of form of expression that is more up to date with who you are now rather than with what you've identified with previously. So yeah, that is what I have for you, Scorpio Rising. So for Sagittarius Rising, we have the moon is in the fourth house, the north node is in the fifth, the sun is in the 10th house, and the south node is in the 11th. So one thing I need to point out off the bat is that this is angular for you. This eclipse and this series of eclipses are going to be angular. And that not only means that they will be very significant for you, these eclipses will hold special significance as they occur for your life. But additionally, what it indicates is that the upcoming couple of years are very significant years within your life. So there's a very broad and particular significance to these years in the unfoldment of your life, more or less. Now, with the moon in the fourth house here, a lot of what is going to be transforming and transmuting and evolving, experiencing these poignant shifts and changes, which are going to be changing your experience of life prior to these eclipses versus by 2027, by the end of it, will be around questions of your origin narrative and your family, where you come from, and what that means to you, and how that shapes what you think that you're capable of, the kind of perspective of one's lot in life. And so that will be being transformed in a way that is going to kind of break that apart, where the assumptions that one makes about where they come from and how that impacts where they can go, that's being shaken up within your life during this period of time. Additionally, questions around your family, there could be additions or subtractions. There could be the dissolution of certain relationships within the family or alterations within those between them or between yourself and them. And all of this will happen in ways that very fundamentally impact your own life and your own experience. Additionally, we can see these matters coming up with regard to the home. So where you live, the physical home. I would not at all be surprised to see you moving during this period of time, either to a different home, like a building in the same city, or to a different place altogether. And this could have to do with leaving a particular career or job for a different one as well. That could definitely be tied together. And the location as well will be experiencing shifts and changes and transformations. So there could be, even if you're not necessarily moving, though I would definitely expect to see a lot of people with this alignment move. If it's not moving, then it would be a major fundamental change within the home environment. So the location of the home, the environment around it could change to where the experience of that location is very different. So for instance, I'll just give you an example. I moved to Austin, Texas in 2008, and then I lived there for a long time and it changed quite a bit, but then I left for several years And then I came back and I lived there in 2022 and 2023. And my whole experience of the city was very different because the city had grown and changed so much that it no longer really felt like home to me, even though, I could go to the grocery store that I lived there and I could go to some of the same places, but even there, the people there were different because the population had changed so much. So it didn't quite feel like home anymore, even though it was the same place. And additionally, for instance, if there are some changes that are happening in your career where you're either working from home or you're not, that will change the environment of the home. So then the home becomes a work environment or it ceases to be a work environment. And the nature of that place and that location and that sentimental experience of the physical home changes. Now, with the sun in the 10th house, again, we could see you leaving a job or potentially looking for a different job because you want to move. And there may be some major changes with regard to your public standing or your legacy, which are likely somehow tied into questions around your family and your home as well, and where you're living. Your long-term direction may also change pretty drastically over the course of the coming couple of years. And you may see inklings of this, the first sparks of it arise in this September, where you may see, like, there may be something that sparks your interest, or you may recognize or suddenly see that there's an aspect of your life that you're actually just not interested in and you don't want to pursue anymore. And so there can be a spark around this where in the coming years, then you start to pursue a somewhat different direction because there's something different that is then driving you. And that would be the purpose around it and what you feel that you are really aligned to in terms of what you want to be responsible for and what would fulfill you to take on as a responsibility. So there's a lot of changes with regard to that. And it will probably often feel like a lot of shedding where I don't want for this to be my purpose anymore. I don't want to take responsibility for this thing anymore because I just kind of don't care, and there's something else that I care about quite a bit that's kind of swooping in and is taking a lot of that priority for me. So I would expect a major rethink of the career and legacy and what you're really wanting to pursue in that field. And for that to be kind of dynamically woven into additional questions of active desires around how you want to be with your family and how you want to experience them and how you see yourself with regard to them. And then also potentially questions around where you're living and the environment of your living situation. Now, in this particular eclipse in September, the signature of this eclipse will carry for about 6 months until we get into the next set of eclipses in March. And the signature of this one in particular has Jupiter in your 7th house, Venus in your 11th house, and Mars in your 8th house. So let's kind of take that into consideration as well. So we have a lot of benefit for you and a lot of help and support for you from others in your life. So friends and colleagues, I think, are very understanding to you around some of these changes that I think are coming up as little urges of things that you want to shake up, things that you want to change, new ideas that you're having around your life and the direction that you're wanting for it to go in. So I would definitely communicate with people about this and some of these thoughts that you're having and get some feedback from them, because I believe that that will be very, very helpful to you. But there will also probably be some internal fears that arise within you around these changes because they're so fundamental. And you may also really feel that, okay, a lot of change is coming and I don't quite know exactly what it is, but I can feel it coming. And there may be a bit of a reactive resistance to that feeling where something that should feel exciting comes through as anxiety. So try not to let that shake you up too much. Try to lean more into the excitement around changes aspect than the anxiety around it. Because if you need some confirmation, I can offer it to you. We have the nodes are moving into your angular houses. During this time, you're supposed to be rethinking and changing these things. So it's not like you're being irrational. These are genuine thoughts that are coming to you. And this is a genuine direction that, the universe or the collective is wanting for you to go in. There's changes that are wanting to be made here. So try not to question yourself to the extent that you somehow almost gaslight yourself into thinking that you're just being irrational or that you're being reckless. This isn't reckless. This is genuinely changes that you're being driven to make. So I hope that that makes sense to you, and I hope that this helps, but that is what I have for you, Sagittarius Rising. Okay, so for Capricorn Rising, we have the moon and the north node in the third and fourth houses here. And we have the sun and the south node in the ninth and 10th houses here. And with the moon in the third house, a lot of what we are going to see transforming and evolving in your life in the coming couple of years, which will likely be punctuated by these kind of poignant and sudden shifts and changes, will be around questions of communication and commerce. So the trade that you were engaged in could change. And not just that the trade that you were engaging in changing in terms of you doing something else, but the field changing to an extent. So there may be different aspects of that are coming in. For instance, maybe you're in a field that's going to be affected by AI. Then your field would be changing quite a bit. And that would also lead into this communication and technology kind of theme that comes through with the third house as well, where there's a change in the way that one communicates in your field and in your trade because of the fact that there may be more computers involved, or they may be involved to a greater extent than they have been before. So this could also change your environment and your daily life. So you may also see a lot of changes coming through in your neighborhood. Your city may be changing and your immediate environment. The routines and errands and the places that you tend to go on a day-to-day basis, the way that you get there or the way that they are and that they feel and that you experience them could be very different as well. So maybe this could be even just your grocery store shuts down, and so you have to go to a different grocery store. And so that kind of changes up your routine in a way. We could also have you choosing to include different types of activities in your daily life. So for instance, maybe you're walking more, or maybe you are even bringing in a different kind of diet or a different kind of engagement with media, a different routine with regard to your waking and sleeping schedule, a new health routine in general. So things like this could come through that are going to have a very big impact on you, but they may seem like subtle changes because we're dealing with these cadent houses here where these feel like sudden, subtle changes, but because the nodes will be in these houses and because we will be having these eclipses, this will actually have a pretty big impact on your life. Additionally, not only could the daily activities that you engage in and that make up a lot of how you spend your life, how you spend your time, but additionally, the people that you interact with could be changing quite a bit. So this would be siblings and people of a similar age as you, or people in terms of like neighbors that you deal with on a daily basis. even to some extent coworkers, though they tend to be represented in different houses. If you engage with them as peers, then they can also be represented here, and those people could be changing in a significant way as well. Now, your very neighborhood could be changing, so that could indicate a move. And in that case, yes, your neighbors would be changing because you would have different ones. But even your relationships with the community and with the local environment could be shifting in a very significant way here, where you're probably getting more involved in the immediate world around you. And that immediate world around you is having more of an impact on your life and your kind of evolution as a person throughout this period of time as well. Now, additionally, with the sun in the ninth house, there's highlighted here things, matters around education and philosophy. Now, you may have viewed education in a certain way for a while, and that could be changing, where maybe you thought you were going to go along one path in your career and your education, and you may be choosing to change things up during this period of time. So if you're already in school, this could be a major change. This could be, I'm not going to change my major, but I'm going to get my degree, and then I'm going to go and use that degree to get this other advanced degree that's a little bit different. Or maybe you are deciding not to go to grad school, and that's not really the way that you want to go about that. Maybe you are deciding that you would rather go to a trade school or something along those lines. And so your perspective on education could be changing in a very significant way, where you are shedding away some of a previous perspective on it. And your new perspective is kind of coming into alignment with your future as it stands now, much more clearly. You could also be shedding some philosophy or ideology or specific type of spirituality that you have been following for some time. And you may be learning new things and engaging in a new philosophy. You may have a political perspective change a little bit, or shift, or even alter completely. You may find that during this period of time, reading and learning about things and engaging with things in that way, in a kind of academic or scholarly way, or even just reading in order to get other perspectives, even if you're reading fiction, that becomes very important to you during this period of time as well. And that those things, that engaging in those things, engaging in learning, has a greater impact on you than usual during this time. And you may find will be somewhat critical to your development. You could also find yourself traveling or engaging in a lot of foreign themes during this period of time. Perhaps foreign media would be very helpful and could be something that you could engage with in a way that would really change your perspective on things in a way that would be very helpful to you going forward, would help you to evolve and mature and grow. So taking in the worldviews of different cultures and shaking yourself out of the general locality that you are most familiar with and the culture there would also be very, very significant for you in terms of being able to better understand the local world around you and how you engage with that in particular ways, and the possibilities around different ways to engage with that, but also the broader world around you and how you see yourself within that, and how you see yourself able to have some sort of impact upon that in alignment with your own philosophy and your own ethics and your own worldview. Now, for this particular eclipse in Pisces in September, the energy will carry for about 6 months into March of next year, when we have our next set of eclipses. But the signature for this eclipse in particular puts Venus in your 10th house and Jupiter in your 6th house. And so there's a lot of help for you in these developments from your career and your ability to work. So Your work environment should be very supportive to you during this time. It should be helping you to be able to better engage with your immediate environment. You should be experiencing some level of growth and development and benefit within your career and your work during this time. But there may also be an issue of some sort of personal relationship, which could be some catalyst as well for you engaging in your environment in a somewhat different way. So maybe there is someone who has had a relatively limiting impact on you, and you're kind of recognizing that. And you are therefore, if you are, for instance, severing ties with someone, which can definitely be the case when Mars is transiting your seventh house, that is a common way for that to come through. And you have found that they have had some impact on the way that you live your day-to-day life, then by no longer having them as a factor there or as a limitation, then you could be engaging in your community differently, and therefore also engaging in, taking in different types of media, taking in different types of perspectives and learning about new topics and so on and so forth in response to severing that tie. Now, it may feel a little bit difficult at first, but if you are dealing with something like that right now, then I would really recommend to just fully engage. Read anything you can read, watch different types of media, go outside, go to the park, go to wherever, engage with people, hang out with friends, hang out with family and peers and colleagues, and really engage with the world around you, because that during this period of time is what's going to pull you into the next beneficial and correctly aligned phase of your life. So that is what I have for you, Capricorn Rising. Okay, so for Aquarius Rising, we have the moon is in the second house here, and the north node is in the third house. We have the sun in your eighth house, and the south node will be in your ninth house for now. So much of what is going to be transforming and transmuting and evolving for you in the coming years, starting this September, and the areas of life in which you will experience some sudden and very poignant changes and shifts and events will be around questions of your resources and possessions in the second house here. So how you engage with those things, how you value those things, what is it in the material that you really value and that you really feel like you need for security. You may find that your income is making kind of leaps and bounds, but it may also be variable. So that is one thing that we want to keep in mind, is that, for instance, if you are freelancing and you suddenly wind up with many clients, I would, with this, if I were looking at this in my own chart, I would say, awesome, wonderful. It looks like we've got this going on for a couple years. So that's solid. But that's the moon there, and we're dealing with the moon's nodes. And what do we know about the moon? It shifts, it changes. So I'm going to take a certain percentage of this, and I'm always going to keep putting it in savings for the ebb periods, because there may be some ebbs as well, where you won't lose business. This is something that you're going through for some years, where you've got those awesome flows coming in, but there may be little periods of time where things slow down a little bit. So I wouldn't expect it to be pedal to the metal for the whole time, just because you might experience that at certain points here. So being smart around that would be really excellent. But there's something about you feeling a lot more secure by the end of this than you came into it, and especially with regard to questions around money and income and finance. So you may also find yourself making certain financial steps that you haven't before. So, for instance, getting certain types of accounts, like a business account, or investing for the first time, because you may have that income to invest. You may find yourself coming into certain types of possessions that you haven't had before. So, for instance, if you are buying your first personal car, or you're buying a home or something like this, then this creates a certain level of security and stability, but it's also a new possession that you have. And additionally, this can build up your self-worth. So you will probably have a much stronger sense of self-worth and what it is that you value by the end of this eclipse series than you had coming into this. Now, there can be a little bit of a risk of becoming a little overly materialistic throughout this period of time, but you can deal with that later when that North Node comes into your first house and you start questioning things and so on and so forth. So for right now, it looks to me like the eclipses are trying to bring to you a level of financial security that may be quite new for you. So, or it's at least transforming your relationship with that in a way that's making you feel more secure. So we also have the sun is in the 8th house. So there's questions here around joint resources. Now, it may be that you have previously mostly signed contracts with other people. Maybe you needed to join forces with others in order to get the kinds of terms in contracts that you're looking for. You may have previously mostly lived with other people, for instance, or lived with people in a sense where their name was also on a contract for that place. Things like this, where you're sharing possessions and you are mutually kind of dependent upon the responsibility of the other. That is something that is coming into focus here as something that's being shed away. So you may be deciding that you don't want to do that anymore because maybe you have had some weird experiences with that, as I think a lot of us have. Now, there's also certain psychological or subconscious complexes that may arise in weird ways that may come through pretty sharply around the eclipses in particular, because this is the 8th house. It's a bit of a weird house. And so that can come through in ways where you didn't realize maybe previously that you had some sort of hang up or complex around a certain thing. And that could come through in ways that are a little bit unsettling in the moment, but at least it brings it to your attention so that it's something that you can address and you can shed and you can release, because the South Node will be coming through this area, and that is helping you to release that if it's not serving you. And again, questions around debts and dependencies, those are being shed. You've learned a lot of lessons around those, and you'll continue to learn lessons around that. But during this time, it's really about shedding those things and releasing those things. So there's a major focus on becoming more self-reliant and having fewer potentially bad debts or debts that make you reliant on others. A mortgage is certainly a huge debt, but many consider it to be a good debt, So those matters are also coming up, probably in terms of the way that you've done things before, where you're releasing that in a way in order to feel more secure and more self-sufficient and more self-reliant so that you're not dependent upon someone else. Now, this particular eclipse in September has its own signature, and that will carry through until approximately next March when we come into the next eclipse set. And for you, this particular signature is placing Jupiter in your 5th house and Venus in your 9th house. So there's also a sense of really joyful curiosity that's coming through for you during this period of time, which is very beneficial to you. And it may be through certain types of media and even potentially foreign media or foreign travel, where you're picking up certain types of perspectives that are teaching you more about the value of self-reliance and the value of having a strong sense of self-worth, to where you're able to experience that as a sort of joyous confidence within yourself and a joyous sense of security. So it's not just like this very kind of boring 9 to 5, I know exactly when I'm going to retire. I know exactly how everything is going to play out. It's more that you have the security that is offering you a sense of freedom because you're able to pursue certain things that you enjoy because you have the resources to do that. And you have the confidence to be able to do that with your resources. So I would say, just try and keep in mind we have some moon energy here with the second house. So do try and save money just as much as you're spending it on things that are enjoyable. So we do also have Mars as a signature in this sixth house. So what this is kind of pointing to is that there may be that this curiosity and this enjoyment and this confidence could represent in a problematic way in terms of detail orientation. So because you have maybe a pretty steady income or a full calendar of clients or something like this, you could, like, the devil's in the details is pretty specifically how this would come through in Mars in the sixth house. So what I mean by that is, one, if there's any contracts involved, which there can be with eighth and second house involvement here, make sure you read the fine print. Additionally, in terms of the you don't want to overlook important details when you're doing your work and that brings you your income. So when it comes to financial matters, both income and outgoing in terms of contracts and things like that, you definitely want to pay attention to the details and make sure that you're not overlooking little things. And also that you're not utilizing poor time management, because time management can be an issue when we have a problematic actor in the house of time management. So that's something that we do want to keep an eye on in these coming 6 months, which should be really wonderful, and which is also leading into a couple of years of building up your finances and everything. But during this time, we do want to keep in mind that it does take, putting that one foot in front of the other to build up that big picture that we're getting pretty excited about there. So that is what I have for you, Aquarius Rising. Okay, so for Pisces Rising, we have, first off, this is angular in your chart. So not only does that make all of the eclipses that are going to be coming up in Pisces and Virgo very important to you, in the sense that please do pay attention to eclipse seasons because they're affecting you more than others in particular. But additionally, what this signifies when the nodal axis moves into these angular houses for you, then what that signifies is also a very significant and important and pretty momentous couple of years in your life. So in the unfoldment of your life, the coming couple years until about February of 2027 do take on a special importance. So that is something that I want to emphasize here. Now, additionally, we have that moon in the first with the north node in the second, and we have the sun is in your seventh house, and currently the south node is in your eighth house. So with the moon and this lunar eclipse happening in your first house, this is very, very important for you in terms of yourself and your personality. And this is kind of a kick-starting of an evolution and a change and transmutation of yourself and your personality that will be unfolding over the coming couple of years. There are aspects of your identity. There are aspects of the way that you present yourself, that you engage with others, where it's new. And it's very different than the way that you have expressed yourself previously. This will probably feel like some level of a new confidence, although it might be a little bit of a back and forth in terms of the confidence early on, in particular because this is our first time through with something that's very new for you personally, but additionally because we do have co-present with that moon, Saturn and Neptune. So it's like you're getting your footing a little bit, it's a little bit like sea legs in a new situation. But that new situation is newfound confidence and newfound sense of yourself, which is future oriented and is properly aligned. And so you may start to find that your appearance is changing, that you're engaging with people differently in terms of the way that, like, your personality, the way that you come off to them, as well as through your presentation in terms of who do you present yourself as being? Do you present yourself as a professional? Do you present yourself as a spiritual person? Do you present yourself as fun loving? Do you present yourself as kind of dour? You know, how do you come off to people, and what are you coming off as? All of this is liable to a lot of change in the coming years, as well as there may be a lot of changes with regard to your body. I would definitely recommend throughout this period of time utilizing some sort of exercise or something healthy for your body, because you can get a lot of benefit from that, for one thing. But for another thing, this will kind of shake things up for you in that way. And so we want to make sure that with that north node there, that we're always kind of going in the proper direction with that, because the body is obviously very important. So again, also with your intention and your energy, it's going to be focused in an area that is somewhat, again, new and changed, and it will be changing in the coming years, but it's also going to be very much more driven and almost sure of the new path throughout this period of time. So you will be able to utilize your intention and your energy a lot more effectively and more impressively in the coming years than you may have been able to in previous years. And a lot of that may be coming through, you may have your footing financially, and you may have gotten that in recent years with the North Node having been transiting your second house. And you may have also picked up a lot of self-worth and self-esteem in recent years with that transit of the second house, which is now coming into your personality directly, where it's less a matter of I feel more secure with my life, coming into I feel more secure within myself. And so I'm able to express in a way that is more bold, because I trust myself with that. And I know that that is me, and that I know that it is reasonable for me to hold the amount of space that it takes for me to express myself fully. So additionally, we have the Sun and the South Node, 7th, 8th house. So some matters that are also of a lot of importance for you during this time, and where you will be experiencing a lot of change, will be with regard to relationships with other people. So you may be shedding some people from your life. There may be some friends or some relationships that you've had in recent years that you may find falling away. And it may be a bit of a conflict that they're having with this newfound kind of confidence or personality or perspective that you have on things. And I would say that you should probably welcome that. The shedding is called for here. So you're being asked to leave those who are not conducive to the changes that you know that you need to be making personally, to kind of leave those behind and to shed those relationships, because of the fact that they will resist that. And so it will also magnetize to you different new people, different new groups, different new types of relationships to enjoy that are more in alignment with you now, because of the fact that you are becoming a very different person. And so you will naturally be aligned with very different and new types of people. And what's being affected there is, again, it's not only the type or the specific people that are involved, the who, but also the how and the why. So the relationship structure itself, your expectations of relationships are changing as your perspective of yourself is changing. So your perspective of what you deserve and what you bring to the table has changed. And so you have a better understanding of what it is that you deserve in relationships, which means that your expectations of yourself and others in that relationship hopefully coming into more balance, probably, but also is, because it's different, some people will not be fitting that new mold, and you will then need to have new people come in. You naturally will have new people come in, not you will need to, who will fit that mold, and they will be in alignment with your future. And so then they can come with you, you know. Now, that is where this kind of contracts and agreements come in. Now, this could also come through as you are releasing some contracts in that you are paying them off. If you have some sort of loan that you've agreed to, if you have made some kind of contract with regard to a living situation or anything else, you may be reaching the end of that contract in the coming years, and you may be able to come into a new kind of agreement that is, again, more in alignment with you going forward rather than past you and the way that you used to be, and the types of agreements or the types of contracts that you felt that you needed in the past that you've carried through with you. Now, this will also bring forward very significant relationships in terms of your future, in terms of your life broadly. So you could be meeting someone that you would wind up marrying. You could be meeting someone who will become a best friend for a long time. You could be meeting someone who would be becoming a mentor or a teacher to you, or just a very significant person. Maybe they're helping your career. Maybe they're just someone even that you don't know personally, but a mentor or someone who you read or listen to that builds up your personal confidence in a way that has a huge impact on your life and yourself. So relationships and what you are getting from others, what you are taking in from others, is so, so important to you during this period of time in your evolution throughout these couple of years. And additionally, with this eclipse in particular, the signature of it will be carrying through for about 6 months into next March, which is when we have our next set of eclipses. But the signature of this particular eclipse has Jupiter transiting your 4th house and Venus is transiting your 8th house. So those are also in alignment with each other, and these two will be helping you out. So we see that in your home or your family, as well as in potentially the ether, but also within your subconscious, potentially within synchronicities and signs that you receive within your environment, but also possibly that you are able to see certain types of manipulations and certain types of behaviors and things that some people do in order to undermine people's confidence, because you have this new perspective on yourself and you're no longer just taking that at face value, other people's opinions of you and what other people value. The fact that you're no longer taking that on as some sort of imposition upon you, where you're rather looking at other people's expectations and so forth as, well, if that's not in alignment with who I am, and I know that I'm doing a pretty good job of doing me right now, then we're not a match. And that's what that means. It's not that I'm not good enough and I need to meet your expectations, that I need to change myself in some way to align with you. That's what you're no longer doing. And I think that that's becoming clear in these very interesting ways, perhaps especially around the time of this eclipse, in a way that's helping you to additionally become more confident and lean into some of these very personal changes that are occurring for you during this time. You also have help in the home. So you should be receiving support or help from your family or from roommates or people who are around you within your living situation, or an ancestor that you can look to, a grandparent or someone along your lineage, whether in the flesh or in memory, who is also able to kind of bolster your sense of security in your rootedness. So a sense of knowing who you are because you know where you came from and you know the depth of those roots. So there's something that is very deep within these houses that is actually very, very helpful to you in making these pretty huge and impactful changes that you'll be experiencing in the coming years. This first phase of it is helped out by some sort of deep-seated benefit, which is coming from your deep in your psyche, but also deep in your lineage. There may additionally be a boon to your credit debt situation. So if you need someone to come through for you in terms of a contract or something, you should be able to find that. But additionally, like I was saying, you may find yourself paying something off during this time, especially with Venus in your eighth as well. Or at least you may find yourself in a position where you're like, okay, I know exactly when that's going to be paid off. So I'm just not going to worry about it too much, and I can take my mind off of that. Now, there is Mars in your fifth house, transiting your fifth house as a signature for this eclipse as well. And that can bring a little bit of difficulty with regard to enjoyable activities. So, for instance, there may be, if there's a relationship that's coming up for you as potentially problematic, one, you may want to take a little bit of time out of romantic relationships if this is a temporary thing with regard to that. That may be something that you really want to keep in mind and that you may want to pursue of taking a break from that for a bit. But you may find that if there's someone who doesn't fit into that category that is being a little bit problematic for you, you may find that they are also engaged in activities that you want to be engaged in. And so you would potentially run into them in those arenas in a sense. So, for instance, they may be in a league that you're in. And so you may find that you want to take a step out of that for just a short period of time, because we don't want to necessarily give them access to you if you're feeling vulnerable about your confidence in order to try to undermine that. Now, if you are feeling very strong in your confidence and you want to go and engage with that and have that be even more of a boon to you to know that you are able to do that, free will, but it remains that it's Mars in the fifth. So there's a bit of a problem there. And additionally, I would watch out if you're engaging in any sort of sports or anything like that. And enjoyable activities, I hate to be like a pain in the butt mom type right now, but I would be very careful about injury in particular, because in general, Mars in your fifth house can indicate some injury coming to you due to enjoyable activities, especially sports and things like that. So I think that that is pretty much what I have for you, Pisces. And that is what I have for everyone. I really hope that this is helpful to you. Definitely feel free to comment and let me know if it hit the mark at all or not. Anything that you want to offer as feedback is very much welcome. And again, if you don't mind hitting the thumbs up button, that helps me out so much with the algorithm. So I very much appreciate that. And do please feel free to stick around for future videos by subscribing. I would love to have you here for those. And if you would like to share this video, that would be absolutely wonderful. And thank you so much for all of that. If you would like to book a personal reading with me, there's information in the description box below for that as well. And other than that, I hope you have an absolutely beautiful time, and I will see you soon. Be good. Bye.